San Diego Padres did last night and paying Fernando Tatis 4 years before they had to. That's how you get a discount. But because Jerry Jones decided to pay a running back after Dak's third year and not his quarterback, he's in this position now.
Yes, Tatis got $340 million, so to attach the word discount to that is fascinating. But I do understand, Chris, the point you are making. I feel you made an interesting point in our meeting this morning where you were talking about how Dak, this might not be quite as simple as it seems as he looks at the situation. Why is that?
Yeah, so everybody is sitting here saying, Greeny, that all Dak has to do is string this out one more year, and next thing you know, he's headed to the open market, as a third franchise tag is unlikely. But Dak Prescott also this year experienced his own football mortality, really for the first time. Missed his first ever game and subsequently the rest of the season due to injury. On the one hand, yes, Dak could reach the open market next year and maybe command $40 million per year. On the other hand, and I'm not saying there's a great chance, but what if Dak returns this year and that leg injury bothers him and he's not the same player he has been in the past and his value depreciates by 25 or 30%? If he does that, he may still reach the open market, but the deal he would get there may not be the deal that might be available right now through an extension with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not saying Dak has to take an extension. I am making the argument that there might be some benefit to the player if he does, in fact, get a deal done with the Cowboys. It has to be to his liking, but it's not like the open market is the only avenue he can take.
Right, and you're making the bird in the hand argument, which I think makes a lot of sense, obviously, and generally speaking, that's what all football players want. So, Damian Woody, you know that I've been campaigning on this show, and I know that you have been saying the same thing, that the Cowboys have so boxed themselves in issues of their own making exclusively that they have to seriously consider trading Dak Prescott at this point, sign and trading him. It is going to be financially unfeasible to keep him if he doesn't give them a discount. And frankly, they will lose him for nothing a year from now.
Greeny, you're exactly right. And I've been on this show multiple times, and you've heard me say it. I think it's time for the Dallas Cowboys to blow it up. You know, I look at Dak Prescott. Outside of getting a contract worked out, he's going to walk after this year. And one thing we've seen from this Dallas Cowboys roster, the offensive line, which has been the staple of the Dallas Cowboys over the year, they're declining as far as age and health is concerned. They're not the same offensive line we've been used to seeing. The defense has multiple pieces that they need to upgrade. There's a lot of holes on the defensive side of the football. Yes, we know all the big names as far as the skill position with the Dallas Cowboys on offense, but they have a lot of holes, Green. And can you afford, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, to have Dak Prescott on a franchise tag of $37 million? That is just ridiculous. They need to move on and I think start rebuilding this roster.
Real quick, Field, you're shaking your head. I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah, no chance the Cowboys would ever consider blowing this thing up, Greeny and Damian. Jerry Jones doesn't have time to waste right now, right? He's not going to go through this long, meticulous rebuild, especially when he is the man that has been responsible in many ways for acquiring the pieces that are on this roster that we're talking about blowing up. They're going to continue to push their chips to the middle of the table no matter what it takes.
I agree. I agree with you completely. I'm not saying it's what he will do. I'm saying it's what he should do. If he wasn't the person who put it all together, they acted last offseason like they were a win-now team. They drafted a wide receiver in the first round. They acted like a Super Bowl team, and they wound up missing the playoffs in a division where nobody had a winning record. All right, let's talk about other quarterbacks. Field, thank you for this article because it gives us all sorts of fodder. Right now on ESPN+, Field Yates predicting where all these quarterbacks are going to wind up. Marcus Mariota, Field, where's he going?
How about the New England Patriots, Greeny? And a hat tip to our friend Mike Reese, who, of course, covers the Patriots. Mariota making too much money for the Raiders to likely keep him as just a backup. And the Patriots, picking 15th overall, have no guarantee of acquiring a quarterback in the first round of the draft. To me, it would make sense to do some sort of middle market shopping. Marcus Mariota would make sense. The Chicago Bears were actually the last team that I filled in this exercise, and I gave them Sam Darnold, which, of course, means something for the Jets we'll discuss in just a little bit. But the Bears, in my exercise, do not trade for Carson Wentz. They need to make a quarterback move. Darnold needs a change of scenery in a major way. He's just 23 years old. Perhaps Matt Nagy believes he can be the player many thought he would be when he came out of USC. And if Sam Darnold is now a Chicago Bear, that means that somebody else is now a New York Jet. And that player is Zach Wilson. And Greeny, I am not trying to play to the crowd here. I am here to tell you that Zach Wilson, maybe he is a consolation prize because Trevor Lawrence is so prodigious, but he is absolutely worth the number 2 overall pick in any draft. This guy is a playmaking extraordinaire. He has got an incredibly quick release. He is extremely athletic. He's got a confidence about him that will bode really well at the NFL level. The Jets and Zach Wilson is a marriage that I think makes all sorts of sense beginning in 2021.
All right, and again, the whole piece is up there on ESPN+. He's got quarterbacks everywhere. It's fascinating. But let's talk that one for the moment. And Chris, you host, for those who don't know, Chris hosts a local radio show on ESPN New York every weekday morning, 5 to 8 a.m., talking football. And so what is your perspective on the Jets? The draft really does start at number 2 because we all know what's happening at number 1. What do you believe that the Jets will do?
They have to draft a quarterback at 2, Greeny. I mean, how often are you going to be in this position if you're Joe Douglas, being at the top
in their case, they were in this position 3 years ago, and they drafted Sam Darnold.
Absolutely, and their general manager had the foresight to move up, and then they've gone about systematically ruining that quarterback, firing their head coach in his rookie year, and then firing the general manager that drafted him going into his second season.
Sure.
So, yeah, there's been a lot of dysfunction around Sam Darnold, and so you would be led to believe that most of the issues that they've had with his lack of production could be attributed to that. But the fact is, you just don't know. And when you weigh the opportunity cost and what you could potentially be passing on at 2, it just doesn't make sense for Joe Douglas to miss out on the opportunity to take a quarterback.
D. Wood, I'd like to hear you on both sides of this. What do you believe the Jets should do? And if Darnold does get that fresh start in Chicago, for instance, what do you think he can become?
Yeah, I think if you're the New York Jets, you absolutely have to draft a quarterback at 2 for a couple reasons. Number one, as you know, for much of what Chris talked about with the New York Jets organization, how they just totally messed this thing up with Sam Darnold from the get-go of him getting drafted. But I think the bigger thing is when you have a quarterback like Zach Wilson, the opportunity to reset the contract. Not only is he a highly touted quarterback and has all the tools I think to be very successful in the National Football League, but you also, from a cap perspective, get to reset that cap and then allocate more assets to building around Zach Wilson. They have a ton of draft picks, a ton of cap space. Now you reset that with a new head coach. I think that's the direction that the New York Jets go in. As far as Sam Darnold's concerned, listen, Green, I've always been a big believer in Sam Darnold's talent. He obviously needs, I think, a change of scenery. But the one question I have with Chicago, you have a coach and general manager, to me, who are on the hot seat. Are you willing to bet on a quarterback who's been spotty at best in New York, albeit in adverse conditions with all the changes? But are you willing to bet your career on a guy who really hasn't panned out in the National Football League yet?
Right, it's a good question, and Field, it would really, as one who has obviously followed the situation closely, I would feel bad for Sam Darnold because it'd be another spot where he just never got a shot. If he winds up going to Chicago and they fire the coach and he's one more year in one more system, that would be, he'd be on his 5th head coach going into his 5th season in the NFL, and there's no one who could succeed under those circumstances.
Yeah, as I mentioned when I started going through my rip of the quarterbacks earlier, this was the last quarterback that I placed, Sam Darnold going to the Bears. It was sort of like, we've got one team, we've got one player that I believe should be a starter somewhere. It's not a great option, but the Bears are entering some desperate times right now. They can't settle for running it back with Mitch Trubisky, obviously. And who else are they going to get right now? Sam Darnold might be a player that checks the one box of being young enough to believe that we can resurrect his career, while also not being that expensive for 2021. But the Bears have their hands tied in a lot of ways this year.
Yeah, it's a messy situation. All right, fascinating. Obviously, we work our way towards the draft, a little more than 2 months away. Meanwhile, as we continue, the other end of that spectrum, we know he is the GOAT on the field, but is he the best in another